Testing. Okay, so this is a brief devlog over some of the latest features into the game. So I guess first thing I'll do is I'll pop back into the main menu. Alright, so here you can see that's the whole. So this is the new single gimbal vehicle page, and I'll add a few more maps here a little later. But so from the main menu now, what you do is I'm going to rebuild this whole main menu, and it's going to say to play first enter a vehicle menu, and then from the vehicle menu it'll say enter a scene. I don't know, but anyways, for now it's not going to be like that. First I'm going to build out these last two vehicles, and then I'll go about doing all that kind of stuff, because these last two vehicles will make two more buttons. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total vehicles that are fully built out. These 1, 2, 3, 4 are the original 4. Now there's these new 2 single gimbal vehicles right here. And so the rubber ducky has oh yeah, so here you can see, I'm just sitting here in the reset location. So here you can see the rubber ducky has a gimbal on the back, and you can point the gimbal around. And these single gimbal vehicles, they each have RCS thrusters for roll that work independently of the gimbal rocket. So if I move my joystick around, you can see that it aims the gimbal, and if I give it some throttle when I do that, then you can see that the craft moves around like this. So both of these vehicles fundamentally are the same. However, the one gimbal hopper is a gravity vehicle on the moon for now, and there's not going to be Earth gravity, and there's not going to be any Earth atmosphere that is going to be in the game for now, because I'm just not sure how to go about doing that. But there's a space one and a lander one, and both of these have roll RCS, which works independently from the gimbal. And then these two vehicles are 2 gimbal vehicles. So here's the 2 gimbal space drone, and in the ducky cam you can see that I can flop around and see the different angles. And this one is entirely the gimbal. So rotation stabilization is on by default here in this case. So it's giving itself the, and then in order to roll you actually need some throttle. So if I don't have any good throttle, then, but if I get some throttle, then I can roll. If I let go, then the rotation stabilization will take over. And then likewise, that is how the 2 gimbal hopper works. And so you get going up here, and then if you want to roll. And then after I finish building these 2 vehicles out, I do plan to make 2 more vehicles. One of them is in space with 2 gimbals and a full RCS system, and the other one will be in lunar gravity with 2 gimbals and a full RCS suite. So that'll be 2 more totally new vehicles. But then those are going to be complicated, and that's part of what I'm going to get ready for here with the next part I'm going to talk about. So before I get into the controls config changes, so right now the way that it stands is those gimbal vehicles, they're bare bones stripped down so that you, as much as you can, only play the gimbal. But with the 2 new vehicles, because they're going to have the full 6-axis RCS system as well as the full 3-axis gimbal system, this is going to get to be one of these things where controlling it is going to start to be less of a one kind of way to do things, and there's going to start to get to be options on how to do things. And what that's going to mean is that even if you have some big, beefy, monstrous controller like I do, you may want more than one config that you experiment with. So here we have this configuration system. So now I can go config 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 5 different possible configs, and they can all accept the same controller. And then when you want to set them up, you set up this one. Config 0 is the default one. You set it up, and then all your vehicles are going to fly with that. And then you could set up config 1, and you could set up config 2, and these would be completely different if you wanted them to be completely different. And then you could choose to fly your ship using those instead. So if you wanted to do that, what you do is from the vehicles menu, once you get in here, you can go to the settings menu. Oh, I guess I found a bug because that doesn't work. So go to the settings menu where it does work. And then from here there's an advanced settings. And that's not working, I bet you. What do you know? Alright, let me see if it works in any of them. I can't believe it. Okay. It's not working for anybody. Alright. So then, I'm just gonna go here. And so then, I don't know why that's broken, but let me just find. So what it's gonna look like. Okay. So we gotta take a look. Okay, here you can see it. So what it's gonna look like is, here's the advanced settings menu, and you just have these 5 options here. And config 0 will be selected by default. And then all you do is, for the ship that you want to use it for, so once you go to that ships menu, then from there you can activate which config is going to work for that ship. And that won't affect your controls in the menus at all. The only time that's going to come into effect is in the active scene. So then, if you select an option right there, other than 0, nothing is going to change in the menus. But then once you load into the scene, now that other control configuration will be active. So the thing is that all of the keyboard defaults will carry over to all of those configs. They have them all. But any buttons that you've assigned in that original one are not going to be there in the new configuration. You will have to reassign all the same buttons again. And you wouldn't do that unless, you would need to assign them all again, but you wouldn't assign all the same ones, otherwise you would just use the same default config 0. But if you wanted to switch things around, you still need to assign all the other regular ones, so that your ship will fly regularly in that new config, right? So then you can access the config. This part works. So you just have to make sure that you select the one that's going to be active for that ship, and then you can assign them all the different controls that you need for your one controller. So one problem with this whole update system is I moved a bunch of things around, and so one thing that you may need to do is restore defaults and then reassign your controller all over again, which I did on mine. I don't really know how to get around it. You could just not restore defaults, but then a bunch of the keyboard buttons will still be legacy assigned the way that they used to be. And if you want all these keyboards to go back to default, I don't know how you can set the keyboard only to go back to default. So until you go restore defaults, all of the previous buttons that I had assigned to the keyboard for all the different functions will be that way instead, because your computer thinks that that's your preference. So if you want to move forward onto the new keyboard buttons, and the new keyboard buttons are not different for the most part, except for the cameras are all moved around. And then there's a lot less total assignments, because now that I have so many functions that are in different other settings menus, I just took the keyboard assignments away from all of these because I just couldn't deal with it. using way too many buttons, and I wanted there to be plenty of empty buttons in case players wanted to assign their own. Alright, so I gotta figure out why the advanced settings menu is not popping open, but this was mostly just to basically kind of demonstrate, well, what I couldn't even show you, and then talk about how, so the next two vehicles that are going to be there, they're going to have a few different ways of controlling them. The default way is going to automatically detect how much throttle you're adding, and if you're putting up above a negligible amount of throttle, and then you use your controls that might normally use RCS, but the gimbal can do it instead, it will not use RCS and it will use the gimbal. And then as your throttle is down, and now that's either a negligible amount of throttle, a minimal amount of throttle, or no throttle, then all of those things will work from RCS. And that'll include your throttle forward, will actually be tied into that RCS as well. So using a default setting, you won't be able to like just RCS forward. You'll have to very gently throttle forward, and then maybe the RCS forward will be active until you reach a certain throttle, and then your throttle will take over. I have to tune with that one or play with that and see if that's even worth it. So then as an optional configuration, you may want it so that all of the controls are live the whole time, and you just assign, maybe you have enough controls where you can assign your RCS to one control set and your gimbal rocket controls to another control set. So then you can just have, you know, your throttle is independent and it's just your gimbal throttle, and then your pitch and your yaw are on the gimbal, and then your roll can also be on the gimbal because it's going to be a 2 gimbal, so roll will be controlled by the gimbal as well. And then you will additionally have a total separate 12-axis RCS system assigned, where you can RCS forward, RCS backward, RCS left, RCS right, RCS up, RCS down, and also RCS pitch, RCS yaw, RCS roll. And then those things will all be simultaneously live, so if you choose, and then you can interact with them if you're good enough to interact with like 10-axis. That's like a 10-axis vehicle. And unfortunately, Windows only allows up to 8-axis right now. So it is possible to, well, I haven't set it up, but I can set it up so that you can actually assign more than one controller to each player, and then you could somehow split your controller into 2 controllers, maybe using joystick gremlin. I'm not really sure how people go about doing things. I haven't tried to set that up yet, but I do have a 16-axis controller, and so I could try to do that. And then I'll be able to get my throttle, my roll, my pitch and yaw, gimbal rocket all going at the same time as all my RCS would also be on control axis, so that I have a lot of precision and control. And then that vehicle will be able to dock to everything. The plain gimbal rockets, they can't dock to anything. I'm not going to have them dock because it's just outrageous, too hard. You need RCS, you need that precision control. And so that's the big update discussion. And then, oh, I found a pretty big bug. And then also to discuss the future vehicle planning. So the implications of having the 10-axis vehicle is that you can practice flying like a big ship, like the Rocinante from The Expanse or something like that, in a kind of configuration that would actually be available to those pilots. For example, the space shuttle does have the ability to independently control those different axes, but the space shuttle is not that particularly performant. So in video games, we kind of like imagine these highly performant vehicles where their performance is just this, they have an amazing amount of performance, and they just never run out of fuel, and they just have so much power on the engine, and even the RCS is like enormously powerful and stuff like that. So that's kind of what games are like. So if you were trying to drive the space shuttle, there probably isn't enough performance for you to really warrant sitting there trying to drive all 6-axis of RCS and then also all, you know, 4-axis really of gimbal rocket. But in a game you can do that stuff and hey, it makes sense, you know. So the other cool problem with having so many control axes just live for the vehicle is that if you're trying to simulate working with a remote control vehicle, or even in real life, if you were going to fly the space shuttle in close quarters with other objects, you would need a pretty comprehensive camera suite that you could use to see your surroundings at all times. So you would have like several cameras looking all over the place. You know, I mean, it's nice to think that you could look, turn your head, and then just like see every direction, just like a video game, but that's ridiculous, and it doesn't work that way. And you're not going to have some little third-person drone that can keep up with your giant vehicle. Your giant vehicle is already maxed out at how much power it has because the giant engine doesn't have any more power than that. There's no way a tiny little drone is going to keep up with you while you're doing your high-performance maneuvers. But anyways, so you're going to need to be able to switch cameras a lot, and I find that I need at least 5 cameras going that I'm constantly switching between in order to drive like a lander, right? So I need to see front, I need to see up at a 45-degree angle, I need to see down at a 45-degree angle, I need to see straight down, and I need to see straight up. And because the vehicle is very performant, because it's so small, it's like a drone, like an RC drone in this game, I don't need to see left and right because I can usually pan my camera around. I can just rotate the whole vehicle quickly enough usually to see what's going on. But actually this particular vehicle right here, you can see the bubble on top, it does also have a snap look forward and snap look reverse. And so those snap look cameras, they're tied to a joystick, and then if you deflect the joystick, right, then the camera aims around exactly how you're aiming around. So in the center, the camera just looks either straight forward or straight back, depending on which camera it is. If I turn it all the way to the corner, then it looks all the way down into the corner. And that camera can be very, very useful for keeping track of your surroundings and stuff like that. So you can just switch to that camera, wave it around to see what's there, and then switch back to one of your dedicated fixed mounted cameras. Because as nice as it is to be able to joy a camera around, it's way easier to keep track of your own vehicle's exact position from a hard mounted camera, so that your correlation doesn't change at all. So if your camera's fixed at 45 degrees up or 45 degrees down or straight front, then that's the easiest way for you to know exactly where you are. So then if you just want to switch to a camera that pans and then kind of pan around and look really quick and then switch back to a camera that's hard mounted and keeps your situational awareness in check, then that's probably the best way to do it. But now if you're splitting up 10 axis of vehicle control, you're going to start to run out of controls on your controller to drive a 5-camera or 7-camera suite. So, but in fully automated, then the vehicle will automatically know when to switch between the RCS and the gimbal rocket. And then you're only still running on 6-axis, but I feel like you want a dedicated throttle separate from your RCS forward in that case, because then if you want to gently forward without losing all of your other RCS controls, then you want to be able to press that RCS forward and maybe left and right or pitch and roll and stuff all together without cranking on your gimbal rocket. So I don't know, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be wild. I don't even know if I have enough control access to do it. And then there's going to be 5 cameras and 7 cameras that are going to try to keep running all at the same time. So I guess I'm just going to have to sit behind the keyboard and then do a bunch of stuff on the keyboard as well, just kind of reaching down and stuff like that. But that's going to be a little while before I get to having that vehicle available. Mostly for now, you can actually use the configs, the individual configs, so that even though your controls don't change, your 6-axis vehicle controls don't change. Depending on the vehicle that you're using, it's a little easier to organize the cameras that you want available for that particular vehicle onto the controls that you want to have that are easiest for you to push. So like for example, the best example of that is, so these forward only vehicles like the rubber ducky and the forward only vehicle, those ones you really want to be able to see backwards all the time, because you can only slow down by turning around. And so you're going to be looking backwards every time you're coming up on something like a hoop that you're going to need a 180. But with the loader, you want to be able to switch this top cameras up here and then to this bottom camera right here, because you need to be docking all the time. So you're docking a lot, so you need to switch to the docking camera. Then you're going to switch to a front-facing camera that can see above your freight and also gives you that snap looking and stuff like that. And you might want your reverse camera and your front camera to be on the same buttons for these two vehicles, but actually those are the same camera. So if your reverse camera is on a button here, that's the same camera that looks back on this vehicle. They're both the snap look reverse. So then in that case you might say, well, I just want to switch my buttons around so that on this vehicle my two hot cameras that I'm going to use all the time are on the same two buttons, whereas in this vehicle my two hot cameras that I'm going to use all the time are on, you know, those two buttons. And then maybe on another vehicle with the regular rock hopper you have two totally different cameras. And even though there's not a conflict there, once you start flying the one gimbal hopper, now you have all the same cameras that you have on these bubbles in the one gimbal hopper, but you also have all the same cameras that are available to the regular rock hopper on here. And now you're worried about a scheduling conflict there because it's all in the one vehicle. And so then you're like, no, I want to unassign those controls for this vehicle because I want them to be these ones only, or whatever. That's what's going on with this stuff. So I just got to fix that menu so they pop up, and then I'll post an update here in a little bit. I'm sure that I just forgot to. Yeah, I can't imagine what I did wrong. I'll check it out. Alright, thank you very much.